The moment the German police officer opened that passenger's passport, I knew something was wrong. His expression changed instantly, and within a minute, our van was surrounded by police cars with flashing lights. That's when we realized. We had spent the entire night driving a man wanted in several European countries. That night, we were on a regular route. Rain was pouring non-stop. The dark Autobahn reflected the headlights like a mirror. Inside the van, it was quiet. Some passengers were sleeping. Some were scrolling through their phones. Others were wrapped in jackets trying to rest. But one man hadn't slept the entire trip. I noticed him near Wrocław. He was standing away from everyone else, not under the lights, in the shadows. No luggage, just a black document folder in his hands. "Going to France?" I asked. He nodded. And as he stepped closer, I noticed something strange. He kept looking around, not like a normal person, more like someone who was afraid of being watched. Drivers notice things like that immediately. He sat all the way in the back of the van, pulled his hood up, and barely moved for the rest of the trip. No music, no movies, no sleep. Every now and then he would unlock his phone and stare at the screen. And every single time his face looked even more tense afterward, like he was waiting for news or waiting for someone. At first I ignored it. A lot of people get nervous while traveling, but then things started getting stranger. At a gas station in Poland, everyone got out. Some went for coffee, some went to the restroom. Some just stretched their legs. But he stayed inside the van. I came back to grab my thermos, and that's when I saw something weird. The man was leaning over the seat, and in front of him were documents, a lot of documents, passports, different photos. I managed to notice at least 3 different last names. He suddenly looked up. Our eyes met, and for a second, the inside of the van felt colder. "Everything okay?" I asked. He stayed silent for a moment, like he was deciding what to say. "Yeah." Then he quickly shoved everything back into the folder. But after that, I couldn't stop thinking about him. We continued driving. Around 4 in the morning, the rain got even heavier. The Autobahn was almost empty. Only an occasional truck passed by. Then we saw the checkpoint ahead. German police. It doesn't happen often, especially at night. They asked me to pull over. 2 officers stepped inside the van. And the moment they entered, I noticed the man tense up immediately. His hands started shaking. He lowered his head, like he was trying to hide his face. The officer began checking documents, calmly, without rushing. 1 passport, 2nd, 3rd. Then he reached the man in the back. The passenger took unusually long to find his passport, so long that everyone in the van started looking at him. Finally, he handed it over. The officer opened it, looked at the photo, then at the man, then back at the photo again, and suddenly, his expression changed. He became very serious. The officer flipped through the passport once more and quietly asked, "Is this your document?" The van went completely silent. You could hear the rain hitting the roof. "Yes," the man answered, but his voice was shaking. The officer looked silently at his partner. The second officer immediately stepped outside and said something into his radio. And at that exact moment, my stomach dropped. I knew something bad was about to happen. Within a minute, 2 more police cars pulled into the checkpoint. Blue flashing lights lit up the entire van. Passengers started waking up. Someone nervously asked, "What's happening? Why are there so many police cars?" Meanwhile, the man looked completely pale. He wasn't even looking around anymore, just staring at the floor. The officer turned back to him. "Step out of the vehicle." For a few seconds, the man didn't move. Then he quietly said, "This is a mistake." But even I could tell he was lying. They escorted him outside. Through the rain-covered windows, I watched the officers examine his passport under a flashlight. One of them pulled out a tablet, checked something, and suddenly looked sharply at the others. The atmosphere changed instantly. The officers became much more aggressive. One immediately placed his hand near his holster, and that's when the worst part happened. The man suddenly bolted, so fast that nobody reacted at first. He shoved one officer with his shoulder and sprinted across the wet parking area into the darkness. A woman inside the van screamed. Someone dropped their phone. The officers ran after him immediately. I still remember that moment perfectly. Darkness, rain, flashing blue lights, and the silhouette of a man disappearing into the black field behind the checkpoint. He almost escaped. For several seconds, nobody could even see him anymore. Only the police flashlights moving somewhere in the darkness. And that's when real panic started inside the van. One woman started crying and repeating, "Oh my God, we were sitting next to him this whole time." The student near the window had gone completely pale. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely open a bottle of water. A young couple started arguing quietly. "I told you there was something wrong with him. How are we supposed to know?" One man suddenly stood up and stared nervously into the darkness outside. "What if he comes back here?" After those words, the atmosphere became even worse because everyone suddenly thought the same thing. What if he was out there right now, watching the van from the dark? Honestly, even I got scared. Rain hammered against the vehicle. The flashing lights reflected across the wet windows, and the whole scene felt like something out of a thriller movie. One woman even asked me to lock the doors. And I actually did, because after he ran, nobody knew what to expect anymore. Suddenly, somewhere in the darkness, we heard shouting, then barking dogs, and a minute later, we saw them. The police were bringing him back, completely soaked, covered in mud, without his hood, and now he looked completely different. Not calm, not quiet, but angry, truly angry. And as they walked him past the van, he suddenly lifted his head and looked directly into the windows, at all of us, slowly, like he was memorizing faces. At that moment, nobody inside the van was even breathing. I noticed one passenger covering her face with both hands, and the student quietly whispered, "This is insane." The officers placed him inside the police car. Then they spent nearly another hour searching the van, bags, documents, even under the seats. One officer explained that the man was wanted internationally for large-scale document fraud and identity scams. He had spent years changing names and countries, and had nearly disappeared completely. After hearing that, the van became disturbingly quiet, because everyone realized the same thing. For hours, we had been sitting next to a man who had been running from the law all this time, and none of us had any idea. Before we left, one of the officers quietly told me, "You were very lucky." Why? He looked toward the dark Autobahn and answered, "People like him are most dangerous when they realize they have nothing left to lose." Honestly, that sentence sent chills down my spine. We continued driving, but nobody slept for the rest of the night. Inside the van, there was only silence, rain, the dark road ahead, and one terrifying thought. You never truly know who might be sitting next to you on a night ride through Europe. And that was just one night on the highway. There are still many strange, disturbing, and unbelievable stories ahead. You're watching Highway E40. Subscribe, because the next story might be even crazier.